Here's another story that I'm going to share with you today. This is also a very scary story. Before starting, I would like to say, read a verse of the Quran. Tie a rope around yourself, turn off the lights, and close your eyes with your hands. If you feel scared, then it's okay to leave the lights on. Maybe after listening to this story, you will feel a chill creep up your spine. If you have already finished your work and gone to bed, good. But if you still have something to do, finish it now. Because once you hear this story, you might not want to step outside. Let's begin. The incident I am about to tell you happened during a trip. I have one brother and three sisters. All my sisters are younger than me. This was in 2022. It was the wedding of our Bapu's son. We had to travel to Lahore first and then to Attock from there. We had our own car for the journey. Initially, we planned to leave early in the morning, but Baba said, I have some office work to do, and you also have to teach your students. You see, I had an academy at home where I taught animation. So Baba suggested that I finish teaching first while he completed his work. By 8 o'clock, I was done with the academy. Meanwhile, my mother and sisters were getting ready at home. Finally, we left at around 11 o'clock. But as soon as we were about to hit the motorway, we found out it was closed due to heavy fog. Baba said, we'll take the GT road. So we turned towards GT road. We had been driven for about 10 minutes when we noticed some vehicles returning on the same road. Curious, I stopped and asked one of the drivers, what's the problem? He told me construction work is going on ahead. At this point, Sohaib Bhai suggested we return home and leave the next morning. But Abu insisted the son's phone is unreachable. We can't delay. Now, let me tell you, our father had an old Nokia phone. He didn't know much about modern phones, apps, or maps. I checked the map and found an alternate route, a short detour that would reconnect us to the GT road. So, we took that shortcut. The road was deserted, nothing but darkness around us. In the car, my mother and daughter sat beside me in the front. My father, sister, and youngest daughter were in the back. As we drove, I began to feel something strange. The rear tire, it felt like it was losing air. I stopped the car and quietly stepped out. Everyone was asleep, so I didn't want to disturb them. The heater was on, and the silence around me was heavy. When I stepped out, the cold wind hit me, and the eerie quietness unsettled me. I grabbed my jacket and stepped out again to check the tire. It was flat. As I crouched down inspecting it, I felt someone was standing near me. I froze. My heartbeat quickened. I gathered all my courage, stood up, and turned around. It was Abu. I let out a breath of relief and asked, Abu, what are you doing out here? It's freezing. Please get back in the car. Abu, with his back slightly bent, whispered, I just came to check. Something about his posture, his tone, it felt off. Let's talk inside the car, I said, trying to shake off the uneasiness. But when I got back into the car, I froze. Abu was sleeping peacefully inside. I looked around, my hands trembling. The entire family was sound asleep. Then, who was outside with me? A chill ran down my spine. My mind was racing. It felt like a scene straight out of a nightmare. Moments later, Abu woke up and asked, why did you stop the car? I stammered, the tire is flat. Abu calmly said, let's adjust the weight. Have your sister sit on your mother's lap so we can even it out. We'll drive ahead and find a workshop. I nodded, trying to hide the fear clawing at my chest. But when I tried to start the car, it wouldn't. I tried again. Nothing. Abu said, I'll step out and check. I wanted to stop him, but I couldn't find the words. As soon as Abu got out, my mother screamed from inside the car. Come back inside. Quickly. Abu and I rushed back in. I asked, what happened? She was trembling, her voice barely a whisper. I saw an old man outside. His ears were long like a rabbit's, and he had no tail. Hearing this, my sisters were terrified. The fear in their eyes was palpable, and the tension inside the car was suffocating. To make matters worse, the bonnet of the car was open, blocking our view of the road ahead. My father, trying to stay composed, said, should we stay here until morning? Maybe by God's grace, the car will be fine. But I wasn't ready to sit idle. I replied, no, we can't wait here all night. Everyone has to come with me. I'm stepping out again. Father nodded and stepped out of the car with me. Together, we went to check the car's condition. It didn't make sense. The car was a new Honda Civic, a 2019 model. Everything seemed fine. But when I got back into the car and started it, nothing. Nothing. The engine roared for a second but stopped immediately. After that, it wouldn't start at all. Father, trying to stay hopeful, said, "You all stay in the car. I'll go out with Munib and see if we can find a mechanic." But I didn't want Abu to go out alone. Besides, he had just lit a cigarette. We rolled down the car windows slightly to keep an eye on him as he stood near the car. Then something strange happened. Abu suddenly started moving. He walked in front of the car and began pushing something. Turtles. He was pushing turtles towards the road. The sight was bizarre and utterly terrifying. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. What was he doing? I quickly grabbed the flashlight and a whip from the car and stepped out to protect myself. When I turned on the flashlight, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Abu had gone far ahead, disappearing into the darkness. I panicked and ran after him, the cold air biting my face. In my rush, my mobile slipped out of my hand and fell somewhere on the road. I needed it. I needed to contact my family. But right now, my priority was Abu. When I finally caught up to him, I hugged him tightly. I could feel my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. But Abu, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't understand. There was anger in his eyes. I made him sit down and tried to catch my breath. As I sat there, my thoughts drifted back to my phone. I stood up and began searching for it, but then something happened. When I turned around, what I saw is beyond words. The creature that my mother had seen earlier was standing there. It wasn't human. It was tall, much taller than any person I'd ever seen. Its ears were grotesquely large, reaching down to its thumbs, and its face, or rather the lack of one. It had no face, just a round, blank head. There was something obscene and malevolent in its presence, something that sent a shiver down my spine. If you are a kind-hearted person, I would advise you to stop listening now, because what I'm about to say isn't for the faint of heart. The creature, it had taken sister, Madia. She was gone. Seeing this abomination, I reached for my weapon, but my body froze. My mind went blank. It was as if all my senses had shut down. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. And then, everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in the car. One of my sisters was sitting beside me, her face pale and worried. "What happened?" I asked weakly. She told me that Abu had found me unconscious and carried me back to the car. Now he had gone out again, searching for Ami. I sat up, looking outside. The road ahead was clear, flanked by dense jungle on both sides, but my body felt heavy. My feet hurt so much I could barely stand. When I tried to put my feet down, a sharp pain shot through them, forcing me to sit back down. With great effort, I got out of the car and walked, though every step felt like a battle. Then I saw Abu. He was carrying Ami in his arms. I hobbled over to them, my legs screaming in pain. "Ami has regained consciousness," Abu said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But we can't find Madia." His words hit me like a punch in the chest. Ami, tears streaming down her face, whispered, "Madia is still out there. We can't leave her behind. We have to save her." Her words reignited a terrible thought in my mind. Was what I saw real? Or was it just a trick of the darkness? Ami and I decided to go into the forest together. Stumbling through the thick underbrush, we didn't know where we were heading. After what felt like hours, we came across a small house. We knocked. No answer. The house was deserted. We moved on and soon came across a hole in the ground. A faint light was filtering through, barely illuminating the surrounding darkness. And then, we saw it. The place wasn't a house or a temple. It was empty, barren. And there, lying in the middle of that hollow space, was Madia, my beloved sister. Words cannot describe the state she was in. The sight of her broke something inside me. We quickly covered her with my jacket. Abu and I carried her, stumbling back toward the car, our hearts heavy, our minds plagued with the horrors of the night. And as we walked, one thought kept echoing in my mind: may God save anyone from such a night. What was happening now? No one could speak. We were all walking in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on us. I kept Madia behind me, my mind racing. Then I grabbed Ami's mobile. Ami, her voice trembling, asked, "Where is Abu?" I reassured her, trying to sound calm. He's on his way. But even I wasn't sure of that. Give me your phone, Amy. I'll call on 5, I said, trying to keep myself steady. I tried calling over and over, but the signal was spotty. Nothing. I was getting frustrated, but I knew I had to stay calm. Ami, stay in the car. I'll walk ahead and see if I can find a signal, I told her, my voice more composed than I felt. I walked for a while, the night air sharp and cold. Finally, I got a signal and immediately called. Brother Adhan, come as soon as you can, I said, my voice a bit shaky from the stress. I'm giving you the location. I had to act fast. He who has good friends is lucky, I thought to myself as I hung up the call, hoping Adhan would get here soon. Not long after, I heard crying from behind. My heart skipped a beat. I turned and saw my father and sister, both visibly shaken. Without a second thought, I rushed to them, trying to reassure them, though I was scared too. Adhan arrived soon after, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. My friends stayed with us until about 7 o'clock, looking just as troubled as I felt. In a short while, the police arrived. We explained everything to them, and one of them helped get our family out of there. We made the call to 1122, who took Madia. One of the officers went with them while we followed in our car behind them. The funeral rites were finished by the time I spoke to the Maulana at the mosque. When I told him everything, he looked at me solemnly. He said, "The first creature you encountered was a clever jinn that attacked your father. But there were many other creatures there, ones we couldn't even see. When you fired, it caused them pain, and they retaliated by killing your sister." I could hardly process his words, but somehow it all made sense. The terror we'd experienced, the feeling of being watched, it all clicked. I paused, trying to steady my breath, and then said, "Let me tell you something else that happened when I was chasing my father." I remembered it so clearly. While I was following him, it felt like something was hitting the car from both sides, rocking it violently. My family was terrified, panicked, unsure of what was happening. My mother was scared too, I continued, the memory sending a chill down my spine. We all hoped it wasn't a robber or thief, but the fear was suffocating. Then, without warning, my sister got out of the car and ran into the forest. Before I could stop her, my mother followed, calling out desperately. In the chaos, I remembered the mobile phone I dropped earlier. I found it, but there was something wrong. The phone had a deep claw mark on it, scratches so sharp and vivid I couldn't believe my eyes. I paused again, taking a breath, trying to steady my nerves. "May God protect you," I whispered under my breath. Then I continued, "Now, let me tell you about something that happened earlier, back when we were still in the village." I introduced myself. "My name is Haider, and I'm from Sialkot. My friend Faizan and I love listening to your stories during our duty hours. Our duty time doesn't pass unless we've heard one of your tales. Faizan has one airbird, and I have another. We enjoy your stories a lot. Thank you so much for sharing them." "Now, let me tell you my story," I said, taking a deep breath. "I come from During Ramadan, something strange happens there. Faizan, Tayyab, and I would go there often after offering our Isha prayers and some Taraweeh prayers. We'd stop by the shop for a bottle of salt, then head down a brick road near a farm. The road led to the forest, a quiet and desolate place where no one would go at night. It was secluded, broken down. We'd sit there, chatting and drinking. The forest was only about 7 or 8 acres from where we'd sit. The forest is near Pasro Road, and behind it, the boundaries of our village start. One night, we decided to go. We lit a candle and started talking, laughing as we caught up. That's when Faizan said something that sent a chill down my spine. "I'm not afraid of anything," he said confidently. Tayyab, always up for a challenge, smirked. "Then why don't you go into the forest for 10 minutes? Tomorrow's dinner's on me, wherever you want." Faizan immediately accepted, his bravado unshaken. "All right, I'm going," he said. Me and Tayyab tried to convince him to stay, but Faizan was determined. He went straight into the forest and we could see him clearly in the moonlight. But then, he didn't come back. Minutes turned into 15, then 30. We started to panic, calling Faizan's phone, but he wasn't answering. Tayyab and I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do. We didn't even have the courage to go into the forest ourselves. We were scared, but we knew Faizan needed us. "We have to go in," I said, my voice trembling. The forest, once lit by moonlight, was now pitch dark. The trees were so thick that no light made it through. We could barely see our hands in front of our faces. Tayyab and I held hands, walking forward with the faint glow of our phone flashlights cutting through the darkness. Strange noises filled the air, sounds like jackals, eerie and haunting. I thought my heart would stop beating right then and there. I was so scared I couldn't even move. But we pressed on, the fear clawing at our insides as we stumbled deeper into the woods. We felt it. That heavy, undeniable sensation that someone was following us. My heart started pounding faster. I thought it was Faizan. Maybe he was just messing with us. But there was something about the way the air felt, thick and suffocating. We couldn't be sure. Tayyab and I exchanged a glance, fear creeping up on both of us. We turned around, scanning the darkness, but there was no one there. Only the sound of our shallow breaths filled the air. "Faizan, we're scared. Please come forward. We need to go back," I called out, my voice shaky. But there was no answer. It was then that we felt it. The unsettling sensation of being watched. We both froze, instinctively shining the flashlight in the direction of the tree to our right. But again, nothing. No movement, no figure. The trees stood silent in the moonlight, but the feeling didn't leave us. It hung in the air, oppressive, like something unseen was lingering just beyond the light. The terror was growing, gnawing at us. Our prayers had begun to fade away, replaced by a paralyzing fear. And then, something happened that I could never explain. Deep in the forest, standing among the trees, was a woman. At first, it didn't make sense, but when I looked closer, my blood ran cold. Her hair was long, so long it almost touched the ground, but it was her posture that froze me. Her legs, they were bent unnaturally behind her. Her eyes, glowing red like fire, locked onto mine. And her face, God forgive me, was something out of a nightmare. Twisted, horrifying. Her hands were contorted behind her, held in a grotesque, unnatural way. She stood like that, right by a tree, just staring at us. I couldn't breathe. I screamed. We both screamed, and with all the strength in our legs, we ran. We ran out of that forest faster than I thought possible. A chicken farm was nearby, and we made it there in what felt like seconds. Some boys came out of the farm, hearing our screams. We collapsed in front of them, our legs weak, our hearts racing. They gave us water, tried to calm us down, but it didn't help. The fear was still there, gnawing at me. It was already 11 o'clock at night by then. My phone started buzzing with calls from home, but I couldn't even speak. I told them what happened, but it was so surreal I couldn't even believe it myself. By the time Faizan's family and some villagers arrived, I was in a daze. They went into the forest, hoping to find him. I couldn't even stand, my body shaking uncontrollably. When they finally found him, they called Faizan's mobile. The sound of the ringing came deep within the forest. They followed the sound, and after a while, they found Faizan. Still conscious, still alive, but clearly shaken. I was scolded for what felt like hours. I didn't even care. The horror of what had just happened was enough to make me lose track of everything. A few days later, we met with Faizan. We were all curious. "Where did you go?" we asked him, our voices full of worry. He looked at us, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. "When I went into the forest," he began, his voice shaky, "I smelled this really sweet fragrance. It was so strong. I followed the scent, thinking it was nothing. Then, I saw her. A woman? With a child?" we asked, already knowing the answer. Faizan nodded. I went up to her, asked her who she was, but when she looked at me, her face changed. It became so sad. I don't know what happened, but I fainted. I fell. A long silence followed his words. None of us spoke. It was like we were all stuck in that moment, unable to escape the terrifying reality. After that, Faizan continued, "I never went back to that forest, not even during the day. It was never the same, and it wasn't. The women from our village used to go to that forest for firewood and such, but after that night, none of us ever went near it again." That's the true story I wanted to share with you. I hope you find it as chilling as I do. Please share it on your channel if you can. Now, moving on to another story. Assalamu alaikum wandan bhai. My name is Subhan, and I've been listening to your stories for about 2 months now. I wanted to share something that happened to my father, something that really frightened him. When I was very young, my father was driving a car at the airport. One day, he got a booking for Hyderabad. He left with a passenger just as the sun was setting. On his way back, he was passing through a deserted road when something strange happened. He saw an elderly woman standing by the side of the road, asking for a lift. My father, being kind-hearted, thought he should help her. What happened next? It's something you'll never believe. My father stopped the car and asked her what she needed, but she didn't respond. So he said, "Get in the car. I'll drop you wherever you want." The woman sat in the back seat and my father started driving, but as he drove forward, the car suddenly stopped. The engine cut out and my father was left confused. He was all alone, heading back after dropping off his family in Hyderabad. He decided to get out and check under the bonnet. He couldn't find anything wrong. So, thinking it was a fluke, he got back in the car, trying to start it again. But when he looked around, the woman was gone. Confused, my father looked around, but she was nowhere in sight. He checked the car once more, but she was truly gone. But when he looked ahead, there she was, standing right in front of the car. In a panic, my father rushed into the car, slammed the door shut, but the woman disappeared. But when he glanced in the rearview mirror, there she was, sitting in the back seat. Terrified, my father jumped out of the car, running for his life. He was so scared that he fainted right there on the road. When he regained consciousness, he was in the hospital. Some people were standing nearby. He explained everything to them, and they told him that such things happened often in that area. Many others had experienced similar encounters. They helped my father get home, but the next week he fell seriously ill. A fever that wouldn't go down. His health deteriorated so badly that he had to quit his job. This happened in 2009, and after that, my father never traveled alone on the highway at night. I wanted to share this with you because it left a lasting mark on him. If anyone's listening to this story, never travel alone at night. It's better to stay safe. May Allah protect us all. Thank you again for sharing your stories with us. It means a lot. That's the story as I remember it. Thank you for your time, and I hope you all stay safe.